The sun hung like a copper coin in the bleached sky, beating down mercilessly on the hard-pan desert that stretched between Copper Ridge and the Mexican border. Sarah Brennan stumbled along the rutted wagon road, her boots, once fine leather, now cracked and dusty, raising small clouds with each exhausted step. Behind her, moving with equal reluctance, came the sorriest excuse for a horse anyone had ever seen. The mare was a patchwork of jutting ribs and dull coat, her head hanging so low her muzzle nearly dragged in the dust. Sarah had found her 2 days ago, tied to a post outside an abandoned way station, left to die by some traveler who decided the animal wasn't worth a bullet. Sarah hadn't been able to leave her there, even though taking the horse meant sharing her meager water supply and slowing her already desperate pace. In the pocket of her worn calico dress, $3 silver clinked together with each step. $3. That was all that remained of her father's estate, all that remained of the life she'd known in St. Louis before the fever took him. The lawyers had been efficient and cold, settling debts she hadn't known existed, selling everything down to her mother's wedding china. They'd given her enough for a stage ticket west and these 3 coins, along with advice to find work as a seamstress or schoolteacher in one of the frontier towns. The stage had broken an axle 30 miles back. The driver had patched it enough to limp into Copper Ridge, but there he'd declared the coach unfit for further travel. The passengers would have to wait a week for the next stage, he'd announced, or find their own way forward. Sarah had neither the money for a week's lodging nor the luxury of time. The teaching position in Redemption was promised to her only if she arrived by month's end, and that deadline was now just 4 days away. So she'd started walking, following the road that wound through the desert toward the distant mountains where Redemption nestled in a green valley. 40 miles. Maybe 50. She thought she could make it in 3 days if she pushed hard, rested little, and rationed her water carefully. Then she'd found the horse, and everything had changed. The mare stumbled, nearly going down to her knees. Sarah stopped, turning back with a sigh that was half exasperation, half sympathy. She pulled the canteen from her shoulder, light now, too light, and poured a careful measure into her cupped palm. The horse drank with pathetic gratitude, her rough tongue scraping Sarah's skin. "We're a pair of fools," Sarah murmured, stroking the mare's dusty neck. "Neither of us has any business being out here." The horse blew softly through her nostrils, as if in agreement. Sarah was about to press on when she heard it, the distant drum of hoofbeats. She turned, shielding her eyes against the sun's glare, and saw a rider approaching from the east. A single horseman, moving at an easy lope, trailing a small cloud of dust. Her first instinct was caution. A woman alone in the desert had reason to be wary of strangers. But as the rider drew closer, she saw nothing immediately threatening in his approach. He sat his horse well, a tall figure in dark clothing, and he slowed to a walk while still 100 yards distant, giving her time to see him coming. He reined in about 20 feet away, and Sarah got her first clear look at him. He was perhaps 30, lean and weathered, with several days' worth of dark stubble on his jaw. His hat was pushed back, revealing brown hair that needed cutting, and his eyes, a striking pale gray, assessed her with an expression that was cautious but not unkind. He wore a gun on his hip, the leather of the holster worn smooth with use, but his hand was nowhere near it. "Ma'am," he said, touching the brim of his hat. His voice was low and rough, like gravel sliding across stone. "You all right?" Sarah straightened, trying to summon whatever dignity she could muster in her dusty dress with her desperate circumstances written plain across her face. "I'm well enough, thank you." His gray eyes flicked to the pitiful mare, then to Sarah's sunburned face, then to the empty desert stretching in all directions. One eyebrow rose slightly. "You heading to Redemption?" "I am." "That's 2 hard days' ride on a good horse." His gaze returned to the mare. "On that animal, you'll be lucky to make it at all." Sarah felt her cheeks flush with more than sunburn. "We're managing." "Are you?" He dismounted in one smooth motion, his boots hitting the ground with a soft thud. He was taller than she'd thought, well over 6 feet, and moved with the easy confidence of a man comfortable in his own skin. He approached the mare slowly, making soft clicking sounds with his tongue, and ran his hands expertly over her frame. The horse didn't even flinch, too exhausted to care. "She's dehydrated," he said, his tone matter of fact. Underfed for months, I'd wager. Got some muscle strain in the left foreleg. She needs rest, grain, and water, in that order. He straightened, fixing Sarah with those unsettling gray eyes. Where'd you get her? I found her. Abandoned. Something flickered across his face. Approval, maybe, or respect. And you took her on anyway. I couldn't just leave her to die. He nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd been wondering about. Name's Jack Dalton. I run a ranch about 10 miles south of here, up in Red Canyon. He gestured toward the rust-colored hills to the west. I'm heading back there now. You and the horse should come with me. Sarah's spine stiffened. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Dalton, but I need to reach redemption. I have a position waiting for me there, and you'll die of thirst before you get halfway, he interrupted, not unkindly. The next water is 18 miles up this road. In this heat, with that horse, you won't make it. Hell, I'm not sure you'd make it alone. I have water. She touched her canteen, trying to ignore how light it felt. Half a canteen, by the sound of it. Maybe less. He studied her for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. Look, I'm not trying to scare you, but I'm not going to pretty it up either. This desert doesn't care about your plans or your teaching job. It'll kill you just as dead whether you're trying to get somewhere important or not. You need rest, a real meal, and enough water to get properly hydrated. So does that mare. Give it 2 days at my ranch, then I'll take you to redemption myself. My wagon's faster than walking, and a damn sight safer. Sarah wanted to refuse. Every instinct born of her sheltered upbringing screamed that accepting a strange man's invitation to his ranch was foolish at best, dangerous at worst. But her practical side, the side that had grown stronger since her father's death, since she'd been forced to navigate a world that cared nothing for orphaned young women, knew he was right. She could feel the sun's heat pressing down on her like a physical weight. Her lips were cracked, her tongue thick in her mouth. The mare was swaying on her feet. I don't have money to pay you for lodging, she said finally. I have $3 to my name, and I need them for when I reach redemption. Did I ask for money? No, but... Then keep your $3. He gathered his horse's reins. Way I see it, any woman who'd take on a dying horse rather than let it suffer can't be all bad. That's reason enough to lend a hand. Sarah hesitated one moment more, then nodded. 2 days. Then redemption. 2 days, he agreed. Can you ride? She looked at his horse, a magnificent bay gelding, well-fed and strong, and shook her head. Not well. And certainly not bareback. Wasn't suggesting you ride alone. He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then extended his hand down to her. You'll ride with me. The mare can follow. She'll manage better without weight on her back. Sarah stared at his outstretched hand. It was calloused and scarred, the hand of a man who worked hard for his living. She could see old rope burns across the palm, a white scar across the knuckles. A working man's hand. An honest man's hand, if she was any judge. She took it. His grip was strong and sure. He pulled her up behind him in one smooth motion, as if she weighed nothing at all. Sarah settled herself on the horse's rump, acutely aware that there was nowhere to hold on except the man himself. After a moment's hesitation, she placed her hands lightly on his waist. Better hold tighter than that, Jack said, amusement coloring his rough voice. I don't aim to pick you up out of the dust when you fall off. Sarah tightened her grip, feeling the solid warmth of him through his shirt, the lean muscle beneath. He clucked to his horse, and they started moving at an easy walk, the exhausted mare following behind on a lead rope Jack had quickly fashioned. They rode in silence for a while, following a narrow trail that branched off the main road and wound toward the red hills. The landscape here was harsh but beautiful in its own way, all muted colors and stark contrasts, punctuated by the occasional brave cactus or tenacious sage bush. Hawks circled overhead, riding the thermals, and somewhere in the distance a coyote called. You got family waiting for you in redemption? Jack asked eventually. No. No family anywhere anymore. My father passed 6 months ago. I'm sorry. Thank you. He was a good man. A scholar. He taught history at a private academy in St. Louis. She paused, swallowing against the tightness in her throat. He wasn't good with money, though. I didn't realize how deep in debt we were until after he died. The creditors took everything. That why you're heading west? Fresh start. Something like that. A school in Redemption advertised for a teacher. The pay isn't much, but it includes room and board, and it's honest work. It's enough. Jack nodded, asking no more questions, and Sarah was grateful. She wasn't ready to talk about the lawyers with their cold eyes and colder mathematics, or the way her father's colleagues had disappeared like smoke once the money was gone. She wasn't ready to talk about selling her mother's jewelry piece by piece just to eat, or the landlady who'd begun making pointed comments about the rent. The trail climbed into the hills, following a dry wash between walls of rust-red stone. The temperature dropped slightly in the shade, a blessed relief, and Sarah felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. The horse beneath her moved with ground-eating efficiency, strong and sure-footed, nothing like the poor creature trailing behind them. "How long have you had your ranch?" she asked, more to break the silence than from any real curiosity. 5 years. Won it in a card game, actually. Sarah couldn't hide her surprise. The whole ranch. Lock, stock, and barrel. Previous owner was a drunk with more debts than sense. He bet it all on 3 queens. Jack's voice held a note of dry humor. I had 3 kings and an ace. Felt like providence, or maybe just dumb luck. Either way, I wasn't about to turn it down. Do you run cattle? Some. Horses mostly. Breaking and training, selling to the army and to ranches that need good working stock. It's harder work than cattle, but more satisfying. I like horses. They're honest creatures. They don't pretend to be something they're not. Unlike people, Sarah heard in the words he didn't say. She wondered what had happened to make Jack Dalton so cynical about human nature, but she didn't ask. They were strangers, after all, bound together only by chance and necessity. The trail turned, following the curve of the canyon wall, and suddenly opened up into a valley that took Sarah's breath away. It was like discovering an emerald in a pile of rust-colored rocks. Green grass covered the valley floor, fed by a stream that sparkled in the sunlight. Trees, actual trees, cottonwoods and willows, lined the water's edge. And there, nestled against the far canyon wall, was a ranch house built of adobe and timber, with a barn and several corrals nearby. "Welcome to Red Canyon Ranch," Jack said, and Sarah heard the quiet pride in his voice. As they descended into the valley, Sarah saw more details. The corrals held perhaps a dozen horses in various states of training. Chickens pecked in the yard near the house. A vegetable garden, surprisingly lush, occupied a plot near the stream. Everything was neat and well-maintained, speaking of steady work and careful attention. A dog appeared as they approached, a large, shaggy creature of indeterminate breed, barking a greeting. Jack dismounted and helped Sarah down, her legs unsteady after the ride. The poor mare stood with her head hanging, looking ready to collapse. "Let's get this girl settled first," Jack said, taking the mare's lead rope. "Come on." Sarah followed him to the barn, a sturdy structure that smelled of hay and horses and leather. It was dim inside, cool and peaceful. Jack led the mare into a spacious stall, removed the makeshift bridle, and immediately brought a bucket of water. The horse drank deeply, desperately. "Easy," Jack murmured, pulling the bucket away after a few moments. "Not too much at once or you'll colic. You can have more in a bit." He moved with practiced efficiency, bringing hay and a measure of grain, checking the mare's legs and hooves, running his hands over her frame again with the focused attention of someone who truly knew horses. Sarah watched him work, struck by the gentleness in those scarred, capable hands. "She'll live," he said finally, straightening. "With proper care, she might even be serviceable again. Got good bones under all that neglect. Someone spent money on her once. Wonder what happened." "People abandon what they can no longer afford," Sarah said quietly. "Or what's no longer useful to them." Jack looked at her, and something in his gray eyes suggested he understood she wasn't just talking about horses. "Reckon that's true. Doesn't make it right, though." He led her out of the barn and toward the house. It was larger than it had looked from a distance, built with an eye toward practicality rather than elegance. The door was solid wood, worn smooth by years of use. Jack pushed it open and gestured her inside. The interior was neat but Spartan, a single large room that served as kitchen, dining area, and living space, with 2 doors leading off to what must be bedrooms. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. The furniture was simple but well-made, a table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the hearth, shelves lined with books. Books? Sarah's eyes widened. She hadn't expected to find a library in a bachelor rancher's home. "You read," she said, unable to hide her surprise. "Taught myself when I was a kid. Seemed like a useful skill." He moved to the kitchen area, pulling down cups and reaching for a coffee pot. "Long winter nights out here, not much else to do. You hungry?" "Starving," Sarah admitted. "I've got stew from yesterday. It'll warm up quick. You can wash up first if you want. Basin's there, pumps outside if you need more water. There's a spare room you can use. Second door there. It's not fancy, but the bed's clean." Sarah used the basin gratefully, washing away layers of trail dust from her face and hands. The water was cool and clean, tasting faintly of minerals. Luxury. She hadn't realized how thirsty she'd been until she started drinking, and she had to force herself to stop before she made herself sick. By the time she returned to the main room, Jack had the stew heating on the stove and fresh coffee brewing. The smells made Sarah's stomach clench with hunger. He poured her coffee, black and strong, and she wrapped her hands around the cup, savoring the warmth. "Thank you," she said, "for all of this. I know I shouldn't have accepted help from a stranger, but you didn't have much choice," Jack finished. He settled into a chair across from her, his own coffee in hand. "I understand. For what it's worth, you're safe here. I'm not going to hurt you, and I'm not expecting anything in return except maybe some conversation. Gets quiet out here." Sarah studied him over the rim of her cup. He met her gaze steadily, no threat in his eyes, no hidden calculation. Just frank honesty. She found herself believing him, against all reason and proper caution. "Why did you stop?" she asked. "When you saw me on the road. You could have ridden past." Jack was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee as if it held answers. "Had a sister once," he said finally. "Younger than me. After our parents died, she had nobody but me, and I was too wild, too young, too stupid to take proper care of her. She ended up alone in a town where nobody gave a damn whether she lived or died. I wasn't there when she needed help. What happened to her? Don't know. Lost track of her years ago. Hope she found someone decent to help her, someone better than me." He looked up, his gray eyes distant with old pain. "Point is, when I saw you out there, alone and struggling, with that dying horse you'd taken on anyway, I thought about Emma. Thought maybe if I couldn't help her, at least I could help you." Sarah felt something catch in her chest. "I'm sorry about your sister." "Yeah, me too." He stood abruptly, moving to check the stew. "Anyway, you're here now, and you're safe. That's what matters." They ate in companionable silence, Sarah too hungry to bother with conversation. The stew was simple but good, beef and vegetables, seasoned with herbs she couldn't identify. She ate 2 bowls and felt almost human again. The coffee was strong enough to wake the dead, and she drank 3 cups, feeling strength seep back into her tired body. After the meal, Jack showed her to the spare room. It was small and plain, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a single window that looked out over the valley. The bed had clean sheets and a quilt that looked handmade, the stitching careful and even. "I'll check on your mare tonight," Jack said from the doorway. "You should rest. You look about done in." Sarah couldn't argue. Now that she'd stopped moving, exhaustion hit her like a physical blow. "Thank you, Jack. Truly." He touched his hat brim in that unconscious gesture of courtesy and left, closing the door softly behind him. Sarah sat on the bed, testing it. The mattress was corn husk, rustling softly beneath her weight, but infinitely more comfortable than sleeping on the hard ground. She lay back, meaning to rest just for a moment, and fell asleep still wearing her dusty dress and cracked boots. She woke to darkness and the sound of rain on the roof. For a confused moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then memory returned: the desert, the dying horse, the lone cowboy who'd stopped to help. She sat up, disoriented, and saw that someone had covered her with a blanket. Through the window, she could see lightning flickering in the distance, illuminating the valley in brief, stark flashes. Rain. In the desert. It seemed like a miracle. Sarah stood and moved to the window, watching the storm. The rain was coming down hard now, drumming on the roof, turning the dusty yard into mud. She thought about the desert road she'd been traveling, imagined it becoming impassable with water and mud. If she'd still been out there, she'd be in serious danger. The realization made her shiver. A knock at her door, soft and tentative. "Sarah, you awake?" "Yes." Jack opened the door, holding a lantern. "Didn't mean to wake you, but I thought you might be unsettled by the storm. They can be fierce out here." "It's beautiful," Sarah said honestly. "Frightening, but beautiful." He moved to stand beside her at the window, and they watched the lightning together. In the flickering light, Sarah studied his profile. The strong jaw, the straight nose, the lines around his eyes that spoke of squinting into sun and distance. A hard face, but not cruel. A lonely face. "The mare's doing well," Jack said. "Ate more grain, drank her fill. She'll be stiff tomorrow, but she's stronger already." "You're good with horses." "It's what I know. Breaking them, training them, healing them when they're hurt." He glanced at her. "People are harder. Can't always tell what they're thinking, what they really want. Horses are simpler. More honest." "You keep saying that. That horses are honest." "They are. A horse won't lie to you about what it is. A mean horse shows you it's mean. A gentle horse shows you it's gentle. They don't pretend." He paused. "People pretend all the time." Sarah thought about her father's colleagues, the way they'd smiled and made promises while he was alive, then vanished when the money dried up. She thought about the lawyers who'd looked at her with pity tinged with contempt, seeing only a problem to be solved, a file to be closed. "Yes," she said softly. "They do." They stood in silence, watching the storm. The rain began to ease, becoming a steady drumming rather than a roar. The lightning moved farther away, illuminating distant mountains. "You should try to sleep some more," Jack said. "Morning comes early on a ranch." "What time is it?" "Near midnight." Sarah realized she'd slept for hours. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to sleep through supper." "You needed it. There'll be breakfast." He turned to go, then paused. "Sarah, I know this is strange, being here with a man you just met. But I meant what I said. You're safe here. I give you my word on that." "I believe you," Sarah said, and found that she did. After he left, she lay back down, listening to the rain and thinking about chance encounters and unexpected kindness. She thought about her father, who'd believed in the basic goodness of people even when they disappointed him. Maybe he'd been right. Maybe there were still good people in the world, people who'd stop to help a stranger in need without expecting anything in return. The rain sang her back to sleep. Morning came with brilliant sunshine and the smell of coffee. Sarah woke feeling more rested than she had in weeks. She rose, washed in the basin, and tried to make herself presentable. Her dress was wrinkled and travel-stained, her hair a tangled mess. She did what she could with her fingers, braiding it back from her face. When she emerged from the bedroom, Jack was at the stove, frying eggs and bacon. He'd shaved, she noticed, and his hair was damp from washing. He looked younger without the stubble, less dangerous, though no less handsome. "Morning," he said, glancing at her. "Coffee's hot. Eggs'll be ready in a minute." Sarah poured herself coffee and sat at the table, feeling oddly domestic. The morning light streaming through the windows turned everything golden. Through the open door, she could see the valley transformed by rain, the grass greener, the stream running higher, everything washed clean and fresh. Jack served breakfast, eggs, bacon, biscuits that were surprisingly good, and they ate together. He told her about the ranch, about the horses he was training, about the work that needed doing. She told him about her father, about her childhood in St. Louis, about the books she loved. They talked easily, like old friends rather than new acquaintances, and Sarah felt something in her chest loosen, some knot of tension she'd been carrying for months. After breakfast, Jack showed her around the ranch. They checked on the mare first, and Sarah was amazed by the change in the animal. She was still thin, still weak, but her eyes were brighter, her stance steadier. She nickered when she saw Jack, butting her head against his chest. "She's going to be all right," Sarah said, wonder in her voice. "With time and care, yes. She's a fighter, this one. She wanted to live." Jack stroked the mare's neck. "She reminds me of you, actually." Sarah blinked. "What?" "Abandoned, alone, barely hanging on, but still fighting. Still trying." His gray eyes met hers. "Takes strength to keep going when everything's against you." Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I don't know about strength. Mostly I just felt desperate. That's often the same thing." He showed her the other horses, beautiful creatures, all of them, in various stages of training. He explained his methods, how he worked with each horse individually, learning its temperament, its fears, its strengths. He was patient, she saw, gentle but firm. The horses responded to him with trust, even the half-wild ones. They walked along the stream, Jack pointing out landmarks, telling her about the valley's history. It had been Apache land once, he said, before the wars drove them out. Sometimes he found arrowheads after heavy rains, remnants of people who'd known this place far better than he ever would. "Don't you get lonely out here?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes. But I've learned to prefer my own company to that of most people." He picked up a smooth stone and skipped it across a quiet pool in the stream. "Town folks look at me and see a drifter, someone who won it all on a lucky hand. They don't trust luck, and they don't trust me. Suits me fine. I don't need their approval. But surely you must want more. Friends. A wife. A family." Jack was quiet for a long moment. "Maybe once. Not anymore. People leave, Sarah. They die, or they go away, or they change into something you don't recognize. Better to rely on yourself. At least then you know what you're getting." Sarah heard the old pain in his words, saw it in the set of his shoulders. She wanted to argue, to tell him that not everyone left, that connection was worth the risk. But she thought about her own losses, her own loneliness, and the words died in her throat. Who was she to preach about trust when she'd learned the hard way how quickly people could disappear? They returned to the house for lunch, cold chicken and bread, with water from the stream. After eating, Jack announced he had work to do with the horses and suggested Sarah rest some more. But Sarah, restless and unused to idleness, asked if she could help. Jack looked surprised, then thoughtful. "You ever worked with horses?" "Not really. But I can learn." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. Come on." He put her to work mucking stalls while he worked with a young gelding in the corral. It was hard, physical labor, and Sarah's soft hands blistered within an hour. But it felt good to be doing something useful, to be earning her keep even in this small way. She worked steadily, falling into a rhythm, and when Jack checked on her progress, he gave an approving nod. "You're a worker," he said. "I respect that." By evening, Sarah was exhausted but satisfied. They ate dinner, more stew, apparently Jack's staple, and then sat outside as the sun set over the valley. The sky turned gold and pink and purple, colors Sarah had never seen in the smoky industrial city of St. Louis. The air smelled of sage and rain-damp earth. "It's beautiful here," she said softly. "It is," Jack agreed. "Hard, but beautiful. The land doesn't coddle you, but it doesn't lie to you either. I appreciate that." Sarah glanced at him. "You really don't trust people much, do you?"
Should I?
In my experience, most people are out for themselves. They'll use you up and throw you away if it suits them. He paused. Present company accepted, maybe. Maybe. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. I'm still deciding about you. Well, I'm still deciding about you too, Sarah said tartly, and was rewarded by his full smile, a thing of surprising warmth that transformed his stern face. That night, Sarah lay in bed thinking about the past 2 days. She should have been anxious about reaching redemption, worried about the position she might be losing. Instead, she felt oddly peaceful. The ranch, for all its isolation, felt safe. Jack, for all his gruffness and wariness, felt trustworthy. She'd spent months in St. Louis surrounded by people, yet she'd never felt as safe as she did here, alone with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Sarah woke early and dressed quickly, determined to be useful. She found Jack already in the kitchen, making coffee. They fell into an easy routine: breakfast together, then work. Jack had her help groom the horses while he continued training. He taught her how to curry properly, how to check hooves for stones, how to read a horse's mood from its ears and eyes. "You've got a good touch," he said, watching her work with one of the gentler mares. "Calm and confident. Horses respond to that." Sarah felt absurdly pleased by the praise. She'd spent her whole life being praised for her penmanship or her embroidery or her ability to recite poetry, ladylike accomplishments that now seemed useless. But this practical skill, this ability to connect with animals, to work with her hands, this felt real. The day passed quickly. Sarah worked hard, pushed herself harder than she probably should have. By evening, her muscles ached and her blistered hands throbbed, but she felt more alive than she had in months. She felt useful. Over dinner, Jack asked about her plans for redemption. Sarah described the teaching position, the small school, the room she'd have above the general store. It sounded grim even to her own ears, lonely and uncertain, a life of making do. "You don't sound excited about it," Jack observed. Sarah set down her fork. "I'm grateful for it. It's honest work, and it's more than I had a week ago." "That's not what I asked." She met his eyes. "No, I'm not excited. But excitement is a luxury I can't afford. I need security, Mr. Dalton. I need to know I'll have a roof over my head and food to eat. The teaching position offers that." "Does it, though?" Small frontier schools close all the time. Towns dry up, people move on. You might have the job for a year, might have it for a month. He leaned back in his chair. "Security is an illusion, Sarah. The only thing you can count on is yourself. Is that why you stay out here alone? Because you don't want to count on anyone else?" "Partly. Also because I like it here." He gestured toward the window, toward the darkening valley beyond. "This is mine. I built it from nothing. Nobody can take it away from me, and I don't owe anybody anything. That's worth more than all the company in the world." Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that a life without connection was only half a life. But she looked at the peace in his face, the contentment, and kept silent. Maybe he was right. Maybe solitude was better than the pain of losing people you loved. Later, as Sarah prepared for bed, Jack knocked on her door. When she opened it, he stood there looking uncomfortable, holding something wrapped in cloth. "Made you something," he said gruffly, thrusting the bundle at her. "For your hands." Sarah unwrapped it to find a pair of work gloves, soft leather, carefully stitched. They were made for smaller hands than his, made specifically for her. She looked up at him in amazement. "You made these? Today?" Had some scraps of leather lying around. Didn't take long. He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable with her attention. "Figured you'd need them if you were going to keep helping with the horses." Sarah slipped them on. They fit perfectly. She felt something warm unfurl in her chest, something dangerous that she tried hard to suppress. "Thank you, Jack. They're wonderful." He nodded once, then turned to go. At the doorway, he paused. "Sarah? About tomorrow. About taking you to redemption. Her heart sank. Of course. Tomorrow was the day. 2 days, they'd agreed. Her time at Red Canyon Ranch was over. What about it? She asked, keeping her voice steady. I was thinking, maybe you don't have to go. Not right away, I mean. He wouldn't meet her eyes. You could stay here a while longer. Just until you're fully rested. And the mare's still weak. She could use more time to recover. Jack. I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just mean, you're good help. And it's nice having someone to talk to. That's all. Sarah's throat felt tight. She wanted to say yes so badly it frightened her. The ranch had begun to feel like home in a way nothing had since her father died. Jack had begun to feel like, well, like someone who mattered. But that was exactly why she needed to leave. I have to go to redemption, she said softly. I have the teaching position, and I gave my word I'd be there. Besides, I can't stay here indefinitely, living off your charity. It's not charity if you're working for your keep. Jack. She met his eyes. What are you really asking me? He was silent for a long moment. I don't know, he finally admitted. I just know I don't want you to go. Not yet. Sarah felt her resolve crumbling. If I stay, it can only be temporarily. A few more days at most. I still need to reach redemption eventually. A few more days, Jack agreed, and the relief in his voice was palpable. We can leave for redemption end of the week. That'll still get you there in time, and it gives the mare more time to heal. Sarah nodded, not trusting herself to speak. Jack left, and she closed the door, leaning against it with her eyes shut. She was playing with fire, she knew. Every day she stayed made leaving harder. Every conversation with Jack, every shared meal, every moment of comfortable silence. They were all weaving threads between them, threads that would have to be cut. But she had a few more days. She would take them, and worry about the cost later. The next 3 days passed in a blur of work and warmth. Sarah fell into the rhythm of ranch life as if she'd been born to it. She learned to read the weather, to anticipate the horse's needs, to work alongside Jack with the wordless efficiency of long partnership. Her hands grew stronger, the blisters hardening into calluses. Her skin tanned despite her bonnet. She felt herself changing, becoming someone tougher and more capable than the frightened girl who'd stumbled through the desert. Jack changed too, or perhaps he simply revealed sides of himself he usually kept hidden. He talked more, sharing stories of his past. The hard childhood, the years of drifting, the lucky card game that had changed everything. He was funny, Sarah discovered, with a dry wit that caught her off guard and made her laugh. He was kind, gentle with the animals, and unexpectedly thoughtful with her. He was also deeply lonely, though he'd never admit it. On the 4th evening, they sat outside watching the sunset, as had become their habit. The valley was peaceful in the fading light, the horses moving lazily in the corral, the stream murmuring its endless song. "Tell me about your father," Jack said suddenly. "What was he like?" Sarah smiled, though it hurt. He was brilliant. Impractical. Always had his head in a book or lost in some historical debate. He could tell you everything about the Roman Empire but couldn't balance a household budget to save his life. She paused. He loved me, though. Even when he was drowning in debt, even when he was dying, he tried to take care of me. He just didn't know how. Sounds like he did his best. He did. It just wasn't enough. Sarah drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them. I was angry at him for a while after he died. Angry that he'd left me with nothing, that he'd been so careless with our future. But anger doesn't bring people back. Doesn't solve anything. Jack was quiet, staring out at the darkening valley. I was angry at my parents for dying too. Left me and Emma to fend for ourselves when I was barely 16. I thought if they'd just been more careful, more responsible, they'd still be here. Took me years to realize that death doesn't care about fair. It takes who it wants, when it wants. Do you still think about your sister? Wonder where she is. Every day. I tell myself she's fine, that she found a good life somewhere. But I don't know. Probably never will. He turned to look at her. That's the worst part of losing people. Not the goodbye, but the not knowing what comes after. Sarah understood. She thought about all the people who'd vanished from her life. Her mother, dead when Sarah was 10. Her father, the friends who'd drifted away. She thought about all the unanswered questions, the unfinished stories. Maybe that's why we tell ourselves stories, she said. To give endings to things that don't have them. What's your story, then? The one you tell yourself. That I'll go to redemption, teach school, build a quiet life. That it'll be enough. She met his eyes. What's yours? Jack looked away. That I'm content here. That solitude is what I want. That I don't need anybody. Do you believe it? I used to. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Sarah's heart was pounding. She knew they were approaching something dangerous, a line that once crossed couldn't be uncrossed. She should pull back, make a joke, change the subject. Instead, she heard herself ask, "What changed?" Jack stood abruptly, moving to the corral fence. Sarah followed, stopping beside him. They watched the horses in silence, their shoulders nearly touching. The sun had set completely now, leaving only a purple glow on the horizon. Stars were beginning to appear, more stars than Sarah had ever seen in her life. "You changed it," Jack said finally, his voice rough. "Showing up out of nowhere with your dying horse and your $3 and your stubborn refusal to quit. Making me remember what it's like to have someone to talk to, someone who understands. Making this place feel less like a hiding spot and more like a home." Sarah's breath caught. "Jack, I know you have to go. I know you have your teaching position and your plans. I'm not asking you to give them up." He turned to face her, and in the starlight his eyes were dark and intense. "I'm just saying, if you wanted to stay. If you wanted to make this your home instead of some lonely room above a store in Redemption, there'd be a place for you here. With me." Sarah's mind reeled. Was he asking what she thought he was asking? Are you proposing?" "I guess I am. Not very romantically, but yes." He managed a crooked smile. "I know it's crazy. We barely know each other. You probably think I'm insane." "I think you're terrified," Sarah said softly. "I think you're so scared of being alone again that you're willing to take a chance on a stranger. And I think I'm just as crazy as you are, because I want to say yes." Hope flared in his eyes. "Then say it." "I can't. Not yet." Sarah forced herself to step back, to put distance between them. "Jack, I care about you. More than I should, more than I expected. But I can't make a decision like this based on a few days of what? Gratitude? Loneliness? Fear? What if it's more than that? How would we know? We've been living in a bubble here, cut off from the world. Real life is messier. Harder. What if we get tired of each other? What if you regret asking and I regret accepting? What if we don't?" Jack interrupted. "What if this is exactly what we both need? What if walking away is the biggest mistake either of us ever makes?" Sarah pressed her hands to her face, overwhelmed. He was offering her everything she'd secretly wanted, a home, a purpose, someone to share her life with. But the cost of being wrong, of making the wrong choice, was too high. She couldn't afford another devastating loss. "Let me go to redemption," she said finally. "Let me take the teaching position, try it for a while. If after a month or two I'm miserable, if I can't stop thinking about this place, about you, I'll come back. And we can talk about this seriously, with clear heads." Jack's face shuttered closed. "You won't come back. Once you're settled in redemption, building a life there, you'll forget about Red Canyon Ranch. You'll forget about me." "I won't forget you," Sarah said fiercely. "How could I? You saved my life, Jack. You showed me kindness when I had nothing. You made me feel capable and strong and valued. I won't forget that. I won't forget you." But you're still leaving. I have to. I made a commitment. And I need to know that this, she gestured between them, is real. Not just circumstance and proximity and fear of being alone. I need to be sure. Jack nodded slowly, accepting defeat. All right. Tomorrow morning, we leave for Redemption. I'll get you there safe, see you settled. Then I'll come back here and try to forget I ever asked. Jack. It's fine, Sarah. I understand. You're being sensible. It's one of the things one of your qualities. He turned away. I should check on the horses one more time before bed. Good night. He walked away before she could respond, his back rigid with hurt and pride. Sarah watched him go, tears burning in her eyes. She'd done the right thing. She knew she'd done the right thing. So why did it feel like she'd just made the worst mistake of her life? That night, Sarah barely slept. She lay in bed thinking about Jack's proposal, about the life he was offering. She thought about redemption, about the teaching position that had seemed like salvation a week ago and now felt like a prison sentence. She thought about safety versus happiness, security versus risk. By morning, she still hadn't found any answers. Jack was coolly polite at breakfast, discussing the route to Redemption and how long the journey would take. He'd hitched the wagon, he said, and loaded supplies. The mare was well enough to make the journey in the wagon bed, where she could rest. They'd reach Redemption by evening if they made good time. Sarah packed her few belongings, even fewer now than when she'd arrived, since Jack insisted she keep the work gloves and the spare clothes he'd loaned her. She moved through the house one last time, memorizing details. The way morning light slanted through the windows. The smell of coffee and leather and wood smoke. The books on the shelves, many of which she'd read during quiet evenings. The rocking chair where she'd sat darning Jack's socks while he worked on bridles. It was just a house. Just a place. But it had felt like home in a way nowhere else ever had. The journey to Redemption was tense and quiet. Jack drove the wagon with grim focus, not looking at Sarah, barely speaking except to point out landmarks or warn about rough road. Sarah tried several times to start a conversation, but her attempts died in the face of his cold politeness. By afternoon, she gave up and rode in miserable silence. Redemption appeared on the horizon as the sun began its descent, a small town nestled in a valley, maybe 50 buildings total, with a church steeple rising above them. It looked tired and dusty, clinging to existence through sheer stubbornness. Sarah's heart sank. Jack drove straight to the schoolhouse, a small wooden building at the edge of town. A man was waiting outside, middle-aged, balding, wearing spectacles. He brightened when he saw them. "Miss Brennan? I'm Horace Whitley, head of the school board. We've been expecting you." He glanced at Jack, curious but too polite to ask questions. "I trust your journey was uneventful?" "It had its moments," Sarah said, climbing down from the wagon. Her legs felt unsteady. "Thank you for holding the position for me." Of course, of course. Let me show you your accommodations. We've prepared a room above Fletcher's general store, just as promised. It's small but clean and—" "Mr. Whitley," Jack interrupted. "The lady's horse needs stabling. Where should I take her?" "Oh, the livery is just down the street. Tom Jenkins runs it. Tell him to put it on the school board's account." Whitley turned back to Sarah. "Shall we?" Sarah looked at Jack, trying to communicate everything she couldn't say in front of Whitley. "Thank you. I'm sorry. Please don't hate me. Please remember me." Jack met her eyes briefly, his expression unreadable, then tipped his hat. "Good luck with the teaching, Miss Brennan. I hope it's everything you wanted." Then he was driving away, the wagon wheels crunching on the dirt street, taking the horse, her horse, the one they'd saved together, to the livery. Taking himself out of her life as efficiently as he'd entered it. Sarah watched until he disappeared around a corner, then forced herself to focus on Whitley, who was talking about school schedules and curriculum. She followed him to the general store, up a narrow staircase to a room that was indeed small and indeed clean. It had a bed, a washstand, a tiny desk, and a window that looked out on the street. Nothing else. "I'll leave you to settle in," Whitley said. "School begins Monday morning, 8 o'clock sharp. The students are eager to meet you." After he left, Sarah sat on the bed and looked around her new home. It was everything she'd hoped for a week ago: security, independence, a fresh start. It was the sensible choice, the safe choice, the right choice. So why did she feel like she was suffocating? The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah met the other teachers, reviewed the curriculum, prepared her lessons. Everyone was welcoming and kind. The town seemed pleasant enough, if isolated. The room above the store was adequate. Everything was fine. Everything was wrong. Monday came, and Sarah taught her first classes. The students were well-behaved and attentive. Teaching was satisfying work, exactly what she'd expected. She should have been happy. Instead, she found her mind wandering to Red Canyon Ranch, wondering what Jack was doing, whether he was thinking of her, whether he'd already written her off as another person who'd left him. That evening, she counted her money. $3 silver, still unspent. She held them in her palm, remembering Jack's words, "Keep your $3. Remembering how he'd helped her without asking for anything in return. Remembering how he'd looked at her in the starlight, offering her everything he had. The second day of teaching was harder. Sarah went through the motions mechanically, her heart not in it. The students noticed, she could tell, though they were too polite to say anything. After school, she walked through Redemption, trying to appreciate it, trying to imagine building a life here. She saw a town that was dying slowly, losing population as mines played out and opportunities vanished. She saw people going through their routines with quiet desperation, trapped by circumstance. She saw her future, and it terrified her. On Wednesday evening, Sarah sat at her tiny desk and tried to write a letter to Jack. She started a dozen times, crumpled up a dozen sheets of paper. What could she say? "I made a mistake. I miss you. I'm miserable here." All of it sounded foolish, impulsive. She'd been in Redemption less than a week. She needed to give it a fair chance, needed to be responsible. Thursday morning, one of her students, a bright girl named Emma, which felt like a sign, asked Sarah if she liked teaching. Sarah heard herself say yes, of course, it was wonderful. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. By Thursday evening, Sarah had made her decision. She'd given Redemption a chance. She'd fulfilled her obligation, shown up when she said she would, given the position an honest try. But she couldn't live a life that felt like slow death. She couldn't spend years in this dying town, teaching children whose futures were as limited as her own, all for the sake of security that might vanish anyway. Jack had been right. Security was an illusion. The only thing you could count on was yourself, and maybe, if you were lucky, one other person who understood you. Friday morning, Sarah met with Horace Whitley and resigned her position. He was shocked, then disappointed, then coldly professional. There would be no letter of recommendation, he told her stiffly. She'd made a commitment to the school board, and breaking it after only a week was highly irregular. Sarah accepted this with equanimity. She didn't need his recommendation. She needed something else entirely. She packed her few belongings, retrieved the mare from the livery, and spent her $3 silver on supplies for the journey back to Red Canyon Ranch. It wasn't much, some bread, dried meat, a canteen of water, but it would get her there. The mare was stronger now, able to carry her weight. They'd make it together. Sarah left Redemption at noon, riding out of town without looking back. Several people watched her go with expressions of confusion and disapproval. Let them think what they wanted. She was done living her life according to other people's expectations. The journey back seemed longer than the journey there. Sarah rode through the afternoon and into the evening, stopping only to rest the mare and drink water. As the sun set, she recognized landmarks from her journey with Jack, the distinctive rock formation, the curve in the road, the place where the trail branched off toward Red Canyon. Full darkness had fallen by the time she reached the valley. She could see lights in the ranch house windows, warm and welcoming. Her heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. What if Jack had changed his mind? What if he was angry that she'd wasted a week of his life? What if he decided he preferred solitude after all? She dismounted and led the mare toward the barn, her legs shaky. The dog appeared, barking, then recognized her and started wagging its tail instead. The commotion brought Jack out of the house, holding a lantern high. "Who's there?" he called, his hand near his gun. Sarah stepped into the light. "It's me." Jack froze, the lantern nearly slipping from his hand. For a long moment, he just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe she was real. Then he was moving, crossing the space between them in 3 long strides. "Sarah." His voice was rough with disbelief and something else. Hope, maybe, or fear. "What are you doing here? What happened?" "I quit," Sarah said simply. "The teaching position. I quit after a week because I couldn't stand it. Because every moment there, I was thinking about here. About you. About how I'd rather take a risk on something real than settle for something safe that makes me miserable." Jack's face transformed, stern features softening with an emotion so powerful it took her breath away. "You came back." "I came back," Sarah confirmed. "If you'll still have me. If you meant what you said about there being a place for me here. If—" She didn't get to finish. Jack pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. She felt his heart pounding against hers, felt the tremor in his strong hands. "I meant it," he said into her hair. "God, Sarah, I meant every word. I've been miserable since you left. This whole week, I've been telling myself I was a fool for asking, that you were right to choose security, but I couldn't stop hoping you'd change your mind." Sarah pulled back enough to look at his face. "I don't need security, Jack. I need a home. I need someone who sees me for who I really am and values that. I need someone who'll take in a dying horse just because it's the right thing to do, someone who makes leather gloves by hand, someone who reads books and knows about gentleness and strength." She touched his face, feeling the rasp of stubble under her fingers. "I need you." Jack kissed her then, fierce and desperate and sweet all at once. Sarah kissed him back, pouring into it all the longing and fear and hope of the past week. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jack rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Properly this time. Not because we're both desperate and alone, but because I love you and I can't imagine my life without you in it." "Yes," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I'll marry you. I love you too, you stubborn, lonely cowboy." They stood there in the darkness, holding each other, while the mare waited patiently nearby and the stars wheeled overhead. Inside the house, coffee would be waiting, and warmth, and all the small comforts of home. Tomorrow they'd start building a life together, learning each other's rhythms, making plans for the future. Tomorrow Jack would teach her more about horses, and Sarah would start a proper garden, and they'd discuss expanding the ranch, maybe hiring some help. But tonight, they simply held each other and marveled at the strange twist of fate that had brought them together. A desperate woman with $3 and an abandoned horse. A lone cowboy who couldn't resist helping someone in need. It wasn't the beginning of any story Sarah had ever imagined for herself, but it was real, and it was theirs. "Come on," Jack said eventually, taking her hand. "Let's get you inside. And the mare, she deserves a warm stall and extra grain for bringing you back to me." Sarah let him lead her toward the barn, toward the house, toward the life they'd build together. Behind them, the desert stretched dark and vast, but ahead was light and warmth and the promise of belonging. She'd left redemption with nothing but $3 silver and a healing horse. She'd arrived at Red Canyon Ranch with a heart full of hope and a man who loved her. It was more than enough. It was everything. The mare nickered softly, as if in agreement, and Sarah smiled. They'd all been rescued, she realized, the horse, herself, and even Jack, saved from his lonely existence by the simple act of reaching out to help a stranger. Sometimes salvation came from the most unexpected places. Sometimes you had to lose everything to find what you were really looking for. And sometimes, in the harsh and beautiful wilderness of the Old West, love found you anyway, despite your best efforts to play it safe. Sarah Brennan had come west looking for security and found something far better. A home, a partner, and a future built on trust and honest work and the courage to take chances. As she walked hand in hand with Jack toward their house, she knew with bone-deep certainty that she'd made the right choice. The desert night wrapped around them like a blessing, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote sang to the stars. Red Canyon Ranch had a new mistress, the horses had a new gentle hand to guide them, and Jack Dalton was no longer alone. And Sarah's $3 silver? They remained in her pocket, a reminder of the journey that had brought her here, and a promise that sometimes the smallest things, a few coins, a dying horse, a stranger's kindness, could change everything.